Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about spruce tips, some of their benefits, and the many ways that you can use them. And yes, I know a lot of you are going to ask right away, does this also apply to pine and fir? And yes, it does. But where we live, we do have fir, but we have a lot of spruce. We don't personally have pine here, even though just on the other side of our same state, Washington State, lots of pine trees everywhere. You don't find them here. So anyway, spruce is the thing that we can go with. Now, spruce tips are those new little fresh, bright green parts of the branches that you see in the spring. And you want to pick them as young and tender as you can, especially if you're going to use them in just regular cooking or baking or eating them fresh, because that's when they're best. However, you can still pick them as they get a little bigger and older, as long as they still are fairly tender and still have that nice bright green color you see in these pictures that I'm showing you right here. I've been meaning to do this for years and kept forgetting, but we do have this really huge spruce tree on our second piece of property down the road, and I finally remembered to get out there in time to get a bunch. So I ended up picking probably about 2.5 gallons altogether. I probably would have got more, but I got a small amount to experiment with, then went out and got more, and then went out and got more. And the last picking, they were just at the point where they're just starting to get a little too old. Now, when it comes to stuff like that, you can still, like pine needles and fir and so on, even when it's older, you can still use the needles to make tea. They're still going to have lots of vitamin C, but for the best flavor and tenderness to use in many things, picking those little fresh tips that come in are always going to be the best for that. So as far as benefits go, just like with pine, you'll find that spruce tip is really good for coughs, and helping with colds and flus, to prevent illness or to help you recover quicker. Obviously, the vitamin C is going to play a big part in that. And also for working up mucus when you have any kind of buildup in your chest, throat, or in your sinuses. They're also great for helping to boost the immune system, just strengthen it in general. And obviously, it's naturally antioxidant, and it even helps to prevent and fight cancer, studies have shown. Now, if you want to use them medicinally, the best way you're going to look at that, and again, this is going to apply to your fir or your pine, is to use in the form of a tea. So you're doing an infusion with these things, and you can drink it that way. Most of the ways that I've tried the spruce tips so far, I'm loving the flavor. I'll get to that in a bit. You can also tincture it. A lot of people like to tincture things, so that would be, it could be something as simple as putting a bunch of fresh tips into a jar and pouring some vodka over it and let it sit for 6 to 8 weeks. Or you can use other forms of a solvent for your extract if you want something with better flavor, less alcohol, and so on. Honey and water would be a good option, or honey mixed with wine is one of my favorite things to do, especially since I use homemade wine. It's organic and pretty much free because most of it's going to come from plants that I grow myself. And then there's also steaming. That's another great way to help open up the sinuses and help work the mucus out if you're really plugged up. So, you know, making a pot of spruce tip tea and then doing the whole steam method where you put the towel over your head and just breathe in the steam, but also drinking a tea and making sure you keep that mug of tea close to your face so you're inhaling it as you're sipping it is also really great too. So now let's get on to the many uses. The first thing I'm going to start with is what I've done so far, and I'm so excited about this. So the very, very first thing I did when I came home with the first batch of spruce tips was to get a batch of soda, because I just knew I would like it as a soda. What I didn't expect was just how wonderful the flavor was going to really be. So when you're eating the spruce tip fresh from the tree, it has a very tart, citrusy flavor with some of those woodsy overtones, but more tart than anything. And it's actually a quite delicious flavor. But when I went to ferment it into a soda, this is actually my second batch right here, and I have a separate video talking about sodas that will probably come out before this one where I show actually getting this batch going. The flavor was really surprising and wonderful because I thought it would be a lot more tart because of the flavor of the spruce tips themselves, when it really wasn't. It was this nice, smooth flavor that was almost made me think of vanilla mixed with a little bit of a woodsy taste to it, and love it. I absolutely adore the flavor. It is so wonderful. So I got another batch of the soda, the natural soda going. Anyway, I'll link to the video on me doing this down below. I'm just talking about natural sodas in general and my favorite ways to make them. And then the next thing I did was to try to saute them with onions, garlic, and some butter and a little homemade wine. And, you know, here's a picture of that right here. That tartness it added to a savory dish, I wasn't crazy about, though I could see that being something good with cooked with fish. If you like adding any kind of citrus like a lemon juice or whatever to fish, I think that would go good. Now, I know a lot of people do all kinds of stuff with spruce tips that involve savory dishes. And while I didn't like it as a side vegetable sauteed with the onions and garlic too much, neither one of us really cared for it. We ate some of it, but it was not our favorite thing. I did go ahead and add some to soup. So this picture right here just shows me getting started with some chicken bone broth, and I threw some fresh spruce tips in there along with some dehydrated mushrooms I just dried up, and that was just the start. I took the picture before I added everything else just so you could see how that looked in there, and it actually did add a decent flavor as well as some of the nutrients. Oh, and I just realized I forgot a couple of the other nutrients that is also high in is vitamin A, and then your minerals, magnesium and potassium. So A, C, magnesium, and potassium are the 4 main nutrients that the spruce tips are high in. Then the next thing I went on to do was the next morning as I took the spruce tips and made some pancakes out of them. And those turned out really good. Loved it with the maple syrup and everything. Wonderful flavor. Plus I'm getting the added benefits of the spruce tips into the pancakes. And then I decided to make some spruce tip syrup because I realized how much I'm enjoying the flavor. I could see why spruce tip syrup would be really great and why a lot of people like it. So I did make a batch of spruce tip syrup and I love the flavor. I've yet to try it on pancakes, but I think it would be good on top of the spruce tip pancakes as well. And so very tasty, loving that flavor. And again, kind of a woodsy flavor, but not overpowering, and just this sort of creamy vanilla type flavor I don't even know how to describe. So I'm going to be doing a video specifically on making the syrup here soon. What I have right here is the second method I'm trying. The first method I tried was making it more like a tea, then straining out the tips and then adding the sugar and cooking it down into our syrup. But right now what I'm doing is trying just kind of an infusion. I'm going to stick it out in the greenhouse so it can get warm and let it do that. Now I was reading how some people will do this for even up to 2 months. It was mostly spruce tips and sugar that I put equal parts in and packed it in there good and let it sit like that for a day, and then went ahead and poured the water over it so it can really start infusing good. I'm going to see if that makes a difference and if it makes a stronger flavor because I read about it somewhere, and I'll give you an update on that when I do the video on the syrup and how I make it. So anyway, it's easy to make and it's very tasty, and I thought if I got into maybe possibly selling this, I decided I'd look and see, well, what do people charge for something like that? And what I saw, this is a 16-ounce bottle. I saw 8-ounce bottles that were $16 to $20 for a bottle of that. I was just like, wow. And this is 16 ounces right here. So I think it could be if you got into making it, you could probably sell it pretty good. I might do that locally if I get, probably not this year. So maybe next year I'll get out there in time to get lots more. And by the way, how I'm storing them right now is just in the freezer. Those I didn't use fresh right away. I just threw in one of my reusable bags into the freezer so that I can just take out what I need when I need. And that's what I did here. These were already frozen. Same thing here. These were already frozen. That's why you're not seeing them so much as whole pieces. As you'll see, like in this photo of the first batch of soda I got going, those are more whole. That's because they were thrown in there fresh. Once they've been frozen, they break up really easy. And then the other thing that I did is I made some spruce tip apple bread, which was wonderful. So when I did that, I followed my standard sweetbread recipe, which I'll put a link to that in the description box down below. And I give all the different variables and options that you can consider using. Obviously, since I've only just started using the spruce tips, I don't have that option listed in there. But what I did was I made the apple bread. So for a full batch, you would use 2 cups of applesauce. I use my own homemade applesauce. And then you would want about up to a cup. I would say play with it a little bit and maybe even taste it as you go. Start with maybe a half cup and see what you think. But I think a whole cup of spruce tips in a standard batch where you make 2 loaves of the bread would be really good. So now for some things that I haven't tried yet, but just some more ideas that I gathered from the internet, and I'm also going to gather up some photos to go with it. So the next photos I'm going to be showing are not my photos, but just some I gathered around so you can get an idea of things that you can make. So lots of sweet related stuff, and that personally is where I see it most being great in, is sweet things. You can use it in cookies, so there's some spruce tip cookies or shortbread. You can use it on cake. So some people will make a spruce tip sugar. So they'll mix the spruce tips real small and with some sugar and then maybe sprinkle it on top of cakes, cookies, and so on. I would think even donuts you could do that with. Obviously, you can add to smoothies. You can use in salads. And I already mentioned soups, sautés, breads and pancakes, the fermented soda, and a homemade wine I think would be really great made out of this. I thought about doing that this time, but I think I'm going to wait till next year because I got a bunch of other stuff I need to work on. Some other wines I need to get made up so I can clean some stuff out of my freezer. Since I don't drink anyway, the wine's more for sharing with other people or using for cooking, baking, and making extracts and so on. And I have a video on the many uses for homemade wine for those who are curious. I'll link to down below. But I'm liking the flavor of the soda and the syrup. So these are my 2 main things that I'm going to be doing with what I have. Though I'll still try it in a few dinner type recipes or sprinkling it into this, that, and the other thing. So I probably won't be making wine, at least not this year, because it will take quite a bit to do so. But anyway, that's an option. Some people will candy the spruce tips. You can make spruce tip jelly and even spruce tip vinegar, which I also considered that too. But I have I'm always making lots of vinegar, and I'd rather not use my spruce tips up on that. I can make it out of anything else. So there's just a few ideas that you can do with your spruce tips, and I'm sure that you guys could all get creative and find many other ways based on what I've shared with you. So it's one of those things, if you haven't tried it yet and you have a chance to get some, which by the time you're seeing this video for most places is probably going to be too late, but hopefully by next year, if you know where to find your spruce tips, fir tips, pine, you'll be able to start gathering those and then taste them fresh. When you taste them fresh off the tree, they'll give you an idea what you think they'll taste good in. Then start small and just work with them a little bit. And the more you become familiar with the flavor, the more you'll find ways to utilize them in various things. So again, I'm really happy with the syrup, the soda, and the sweetbread and the pancakes. Those are all excellent. Anyway, I hope that gave you a few ideas and just something fun and new that you can try for some forage foods. So especially if you already have it growing on your property, but even if not, I'm sure there's lots of places you can go out in the woods and find these things and just gather them up for free. And if you're already working with spruce tips or fir or pine, please share with us your favorite things to use those in or to make out of them in the comments down below so we can get some new fresh ideas from you as well. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.